To Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I have one of my favorite guests in studio, as I do every month, Anthony Lambatos of Footers Catering. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Always enjoy it. It's one of my favorite times of the month.
Yes. Perfect. I love hearing that. Makes me feel good. I'm going to inflate my ego. We'll deflate on the break here. It is, first of all, we finally got over the cold snap that was June.
We are full into summer.
Full into summer. I have been sweating for days now. So, that being said, summer, always a crazy time. We have a lot of events. You have a lot of events.
We sure do.
Yeah, so tell me all about what you've got going on. What's been up with you since the last time you were here?
Yeah, it's so exciting. Summer's such an awesome time for us, and it's a mix of all of the events we do. We have the weddings, which is a huge part of our business. We've got the, fundraisers, the nonprofit events, the corporate parties. We do a lot of picnics, and it's just fun to have all those kind of come together. But this past couple of weeks specifically is awesome because we've had two really cool events in Vail. So our team, makes the trek up to the high country, and last night we did a plated dinner for 800 people for Vail Valley Foundation. So, for our team, that's we thrive on those opportunities to be tested and challenged and, thrown that curveball. And so to be able to do that is awesome, and couldn't be more proud of the job our team does. I get to go up there and sometimes feel guilty that I'm standing around too much because they've got it all taken care of, and there's not much that I need to do. So
yeah. Oh, never feel guilty about that. Nope. So I imagine that 800 is a lot of people. It's really hard to wrap your head around that. And you're catering for all of them. What can go wrong in that situation?
One of the things that we talk about all the time is there's so many variables in catering and what we do. And so we're always planning for what could be different, what isn't going to work out. And I think that's the beauty of our team embraces that if you go in expecting everything to go exactly as planned, you're setting yourself up for success. They know they've built in cushion for if this doesn't work, we're going to gravitate here. But yeah, I mean, we've over the almost 40 years of doing this, we have a few stories about, you losing power and hailstorms that rip through a tent and, ceremonies. One of my favorite is there was one night in April, my wife, she's, working another party, and, she's checking in on me, and I say, hey, how are you doing? She goes, well, we're on plan C and there wasn't a plan B.
Oh, no.
It's one of those where you just you figure it out and you make do with what you've got.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, when you go up, when you're leaving 2.5 hours away, there's not time to go back to the shop and get something if you forget it. There's not time to, that safety net gets real small.
Yeah. I feel like you probably have a lot of Boy Scouts, right? Always be prepared on your team.
It's funny, all the gadgets some of our team carries with them and has in just ready for anything.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, one of the great things that I have observed about your team over the last couple of years is how much heart they have.
Yes. Thank you.
Which is a topic of conversation today. We're talking heart leadership.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I am thrilled to have our guest today. It's somebody that I've had a chance to get to know over the past year. And it started, he actually, got to know April through judging of the Denver Chamber Awards a few years ago. And they are like two peas in a pod and gravitated to one another.
Yeah.
But for me personally, to have a relationship and get to know Joshua Hunt has been just such an honor and a huge influence on me as a leader. So I'm thrilled to have you in today, the founder of Trailora, Joshua Hunt. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
this will be fun.
Good. I'm glad you're ready and excited.
Ready to go.
So let's jump in. Trailora is a name that I think many people, especially in the business community, know about here. When you started that, what was your goal?
It's interesting. I had it was a double-edged sword because the goal was to obviously improve the experience for the consumer and employees and the agent. But on the backside of it, I had come from a situation where I was a little wounded and had my feelings hurt, and so I had a little bit of I'm going to get you in my thesis of building a business. And so, when I started it, my first thought was, if you look at real estate agents, there's 2.5 million of them in the country. 50% of them will never sell a house. Of the 50% who do sell a home, the average transaction per agent is 6 closings per year. And, we look at real estate agents and we see them in the Mercedes and we see them in the fancy houses, but that's far and few between. And, the Pareto's principle law of the 80-20 does not apply to our industry. It's about 7% of the agents do 93% of the business in the industry. And so it's a significant difference in the top performers and the average agent. And I spent 20 years, not quite 18 years performing at a high level as an agent. I was one of the top agents in the country. I was one of the leading agents in Colorado and always a top agent in my office. And I think by fluke, by luck, I found this to be an industry that was good to me. But I didn't have a high school diploma. I couldn't spell spaghetti, and I didn't know the difference between an adjective and a noun. And I made millions selling houses. And as I got my feelings hurt and things shifted in the industry, I thought, wait a minute, how can a goofball like me make this kind of money? I mean, we're not doing anything different for a $2 million sale than we are a $200,000 sale. And while there may be some more flyers and brochures and marketing, ultimately, I would argue that a high-end buyer is more educated, savvier in the process. They're financially more stable, and they're not worried about the small things. There's fewer homes for them to look at, so the competition is very different. And so that's really where I began to think, what if we built a company that was a fair service fee, that was consistent and predictable for everybody, not dependent upon the sale of the home, and we built a process for our agents that was an employment model where they had secure income, they had a bonus structure based on customer satisfaction, and then we had software to support them so that they could close a significant amount of transactions without sacrificing the service. And through that process today, our lead agents, all of them will close anywhere from 225 to 350 transactions a year. And so that puts them all amongst the top, 0.1% in the nation. And, it's truly because of the culture we built, the process we built, and the security, but the software is really what comes behind and empowers the consumer to succeed.
And so, anytime you bring in new technology or a new way of doing things, the old guard doesn't look very, very fondly upon that. And, I know in talking to you, you faced a lot of pushback on the other side, especially when you've got people that are, they're feeling very threatened by what's going on. And so as you think about disrupting, what does it mean for you to try to disrupt that industry and to really shake it on its head? Talk about that in the process that you went through.
Well, before I started the company, I went and did quite a bit of research, and the two main companies I looked at was Assist to Sell and Help You Sell. And they were huge in the early 2000s. In fact, some of the fastest growing franchises in the nation. Consumers were interested in this $2,000 fee, but the model they built didn't really support success of an agent, because now if you're only selling 6 transactions a year and only getting $2,000, it's even worse because they stuck with the independent contractor model. But as we really poked holes in their system, one of the things we saw was that they were hypocritical in the fact that, they were only charging 2% on the listing side, but they were still paying 3% to a buyer agent, and they were still receiving 3% as buyer agents.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the disruption that Trailora caused is really one thing initially. It wasn't our software, it wasn't our employment model, and it wasn't our fee that we were charging our customer. It was that we stepped out and we said on all of our listings that we would not pay 3% to a buyer agent who brought a buyer. We would only pay a flat fee of $3,000. And there was a lot of confusion around that early on. Many agents thought it was illegal. They thought we were required. It was mandatory. The state mandated it. The contracts mandated it. Even our MLS system didn't have a setup to change from percentage to flat fee dollars for offerings on buyer agent commission. So we really were climbing uphill from the start. And what's interesting is what we saw is if your buddy's a real estate agent, he's showing you homes, and you're in a tract neighborhood, and there's two of the exact same models, and one's paying 3% and one's paying $3,000, and you ask your buddy, which one do you think you should buy? Surprisingly, that commission was huge impact to agents, and they would work really hard to push people away from us. And they made up stories and spun things around to make us the bad guy. And we continue to say we want to love and serve people well. We want to have kind, compassionate understanding. I was an agent. I don't know how I would have responded in 2004 if I would have seen somebody trying to pay me $3,000. I don't think it would have been very classy. I'm pretty sure. So I wasn't some strange dude from another industry that came in to disrupt that. I was cannibalizing myself. I mean, I was walking away from huge incomes to disrupt my very own revenue streams.
Why was that important to you?
I think it just went back to, as I looked at this industry, I mean, it worked so fast for me, and it really came down to, I was successful because I loved people.
Yeah.
It wasn't because I loved contracts or I was good at contracts. In fact, after I wrote and sold my first home, I hired an assistant, and I would guess in my 23 years of real estate, I wrote less than 20 contracts myself. And so it really became a relationship game. Who can buy the best bottle of wine? Who does the best wine and cheese party? Who gets their glamour shots on the bus benches in the neighborhoods the right way? It wasn't about excellence in marketing. And then when the Zillow boom hit and the online technology swept in, 91% of all buyers admit the home they bought, they found themselves.
Yeah.
And so I began to think, well, and that's not the hard part of the transaction, finding the home. But our industry is afraid to let buyers and sellers talk to each other, and there was just a lot of challenges. And disruption to me became truly in the early stages of when I realized, oh goodness, I have something here. This is going to be big.
Yeah.
When we would get attacked, we've had rocks thrown through windows, we've had threat letters, we've had aggressive voicemails. You can Google any news station, Trailora, and you'll see that they videoed it, and it's pretty interesting. That was a sign to me that we were on the right track. My job now is to protect my employees, because it's exhausting to get your head ripped off on the phone every single day.
Yeah.
And so I was forced to build a culture that said, I love you for who you are and where you stand, and you won't scare me away, to the agents. And I knew that if I wanted my employees to treat them that way, we had to treat our employees that way. And so we really had to shift a culture into a way that would allow people to feel safe about the disruption that we were causing.
And you were able to come through, and Trailora has been extremely successful and branched also into Washington now, right? So two states. What are you personally most proud of accomplishing in your time there?
It would be the culture.
Yeah.
There is, I can't describe it. There's something that happens to you when you're there for a period that if you leave, whether it's for any reason, there's a void. There is a trust and a commitment to excellence. I built the entire thing around this thesis of football. In football, they measure everything. And if you don't perform, everyone knows. Nobody's pay is hidden. There's no discreteness around the money of football. We all know how it all moves. And excellence is expected. And you also have to collaborate with other teams and play under the same guidelines of rules while at the same time trying to beat them. And so that's really what we did around football. In fact, if you walk into Trailora offices, there are TVs with each team's stats, and they know how many calls they've made, how many under contracts. Everything's measured day by day, and it's a really healthy environment to create competition, but also maintain excellence in a culture that says it's okay to fail. You can fumble the ball, and we're not pulling you off the field. We want to give you a chance. Now, obviously, if you fumble the ball all season and don't perform, we've got to trade you off to another team, and we have absolutely done that. But it was never a secret. People weren't blindsided by terminations on performance, because you could it was public.
You knew where you stood.
And your team next to you could see the stats on the TV just like everyone else.
Yeah. So let's dive into a little bit more of culture, because that's obviously something I'm very passionate about. And I love that you brought this up, because I think, and I've been ringing this bell for a while, that we have to move the culture conversation away from perks and benefits and toward, what really gives you fulfillment. And so as you talk about this, I think that this is a really important lesson, is those clear expectations. I think people come to work and want to know what it's going to take to succeed. They don't want to know that the goal line is here, and then tomorrow it's 10 yards further, and then the next day it's another 10 yards. They want to know what does success look like? What does that? So, talk a little bit more about, I know you have the metrics, but how did you instill that into everybody, from managers being able to communicate with that to new hires and their teams?
You know, one of the things I said from the very beginning is in order for us to succeed in changing an industry and truly transferring billions of dollars back to families, we have to be willing as individuals to step up in the company, step down in the company, or possibly step out of the company in order for it to succeed, including myself. Which obviously I had to take that step in December. I think it made sense for us as a company now that we've solved this and it's ready to scale big. It made sense for me to allow a new CEO who would be more skilled at taking it and repeating what I had done over and over. And I think that transparency in just saying, you don't have this, we're just a lily pad on your journey, and we want you to land here. And if you sit for a year, 2 years, 3 years, or if it's 90 days, we want to make sure that your time here is good and that the door's open for you to come back or just feel safe around us.
I love that.
And by no means were we perfect at it. I mean, there was definitely there's a learning process to go about business like this. But you know, we have a tremendous amount of success stories of people leaving us and going on to other careers and coming back. We have people who have gone on to other careers to be successful. We have several people who went and saw this and said, I want to go be my own agent, and we see that, and we're not against them, but that doesn't change our mission that we have a burning desire to change the way real estate transfers from buyers to sellers.
And I love that you're willing to invest in those people on day one. I talk to so many business owners, and you know, well, what if we put all this work into them and then they leave? And, you know, the old adage is, what if you don't and they stay?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yep.
And so as opposed to waiting for that to happen, I think as business owners and leaders, we have to shift that paradigm to where it's, no, I'm not going to wait for you to prove it to me. I'm going to prove to you that we're going to invest in you, and I'm going to take a chance and believe in you that you can be successful. And if you stay for 90 days, so be it. Like, we're both going to be better for it. And if you stay for 10 years, awesome.
Well, our early days, I'll admit that I didn't have all of this tightened up. And so I was accused of having what was called yellow bus training. And so the bus would pull under and I'd throw you under it. If you climbed out the other side, you were going to make it. But if not, I didn't know what to tell you. Good luck. And so if you had a question, I'm sure the answer's somewhere. You know, you'll figure it out.
Go figure it out.
And we learned quickly that that's actually not a place people want to work.
Yes.
It's just not. It's not as fun for people. So
a little too cutthroat.
A lot of early on lessons of how do you just soften the process while maintaining this obsessive, compulsive desire for excellence.
Yes.
And excellence in everything we do. And that's really where we begin to, we call it the pumpkin pie recipe. One of our agents on Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, we were all trying to get out of the building early. And he was on the phone with the customer, and I listened to him, and he was talking to this client about her pumpkin pie recipe.
Uh-huh.
And the special connection that he was able to make with her, that changed everything for that very difficult transaction. At the time, it was a stressful transaction. It was supposed to have closed that day, and it didn't. And so he really showed that, and that's where we began to say, what if you don't know your client's pumpkin pie recipe, you've probably missed the chance to be an extraordinary team player. Uh-huh. And that really became, and it's still to this day, and probably always will be, Christopher Sternholm's mark on the company is pumpkin pie recipes. So.
And those stories and analogies go so far.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about that, softening that you and kind of going into this idea of heart leadership. And you and I have had a number of conversations about that and done some work on it through CTLF, Colorado Thought Leaders Forum, little plug for that. What does heart leadership mean to you?
I think if I summed it up, it's a willingness to live in curiosity and not judgment. Uh-huh. It's a desire to leave people better than you find them. In the biggest ways and in the smallest of ways. And the way to go about doing that is to really open your eyes to the fact that we're all different and we're marching our own journey. And if we can dwell in that curiosity, commit to saying that nothing you do or say will scare me away. I'm here. I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to hang out with you. But I want to leave you better than I find you. And I really think it's that basic. Just a desire to see people beyond the mask they wear, look at them internally, and love them for who they are and where they stand. And
so a lot of that is, I have to give you credit for your willingness to be a little bit vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And you talked about the mask they wear, and you I saw one of the most compelling presentations I've ever seen where you got up and, instead of reading this long, glowing biography, you basically detailed all your screw-ups in your life. And I thought that was pretty remarkable for you to get up there and just strip yourself down and say, here's all the ways I've screwed up in life, and here's who I am. Talk about how being vulnerable, and has that something you've always had, or is that something that you've kind of stumbled upon recently, that ability to do that with people?
I was married for 14 years. I grew up in the church, and at 32 years old, I came out of the closet as a gay man, and everything in my life collapsed. And I really, all that I thought I was, I realized I wasn't. And it's not that I was lying through those years; it's that I was hiding. Yeah. But in that process, when I was coming out of the closet, I saw, I had a list. I had 2 lists on 3x5 cards. A list of the people in the church in my groups and friends that would support me, and a list that wouldn't. Strangely enough, that I had them both almost completely wrong.
Really?
And through that process, I don't know if I tried to be vulnerable, but when you're there, you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I committed that for the remainder of my life, I would not try and convince people that I was something that I wasn't. And I've certainly not been perfect at it. We all dress up and do our things and try and present in the right way. But it's this idea for me that everyone's going through something, always. And if you're either in a crisis, just coming out of a crisis, or headed to a crisis. I mean, that's just pretty much all there is to it. And so if together we could really begin to look at each other look at everybody else in the same way we would look at ourselves. We know what goes on in our heads. Well, I'm not special, right? It's not like I'm some magic fairy on the earth. Everybody's got the same things I've got going on. It just may be a little different, but we all carry something. And what I learned was vulnerability really, it's a great way to build trust with people. Mm-hmm. And there's also, you got to know how to be vulnerable in the right places and at the right times. And what is vulnerability versus too much information?
What is that?
I think it's different for the situation. I really do. I mean, I think, you can't walk into a board meeting and talk about divorce. The board doesn't care.
Sure.
Now, you can have one-offs with your board, and they might want to talk about that. But
Mm-hmm.
there's certain places for certain things, and that's just one example. But, I think it's this willingness to say, I don't want to persuade you into thinking I'm somebody I'm not. Mm-hmm. And if you look at where we are in today's times, and it's obviously very interesting, we're in a situation where we need to show people we're something we're not in order to excel. The fake it till you make it, right? And it's being able to leverage that for yourself, and your own truth. And if I talk about self-awareness, authenticity, and resiliency. Well, you can't be resilient if you're not authentic, and you can't be authentic if you're not self-aware of the stories you tell yourself, because the stories we tell ourselves are the most powerful stories we will ever hear. Mm-hmm. And so if we tell ourselves mistruths, that pulls us away from what authenticity could be.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I think about where we just as an executive team read Dare to Lead
Mm-hmm.
by Brene Brown, and our team has just embraced it, and to hear them using that language, and I've heard the story I'm telling myself is so many times among our team, because it is so powerful and because it's top of mind, about here's what I'm telling myself, and help me through this.
You bet.
So I love it.
Love
This is awesome. I am excited to dive in even more on the second session.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you on that. So be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. You can find more information about the show in the description below, so be sure to click on that link. You can find all of our podcasts at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. We're going to take a quick break, so stay with us. We have way more to talk about, especially to do with heart leadership and vulnerability. We'll be right back. 4, 3. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, here with one of my favorite guests, Anthony Lambatos of Footers Catering.
Thank you, Alex. It's an honor to be here.
Yes, always a pleasure to have you. You bring me such great guests. And Joshua, you are filling my happiness and quote void today. One of my favorite things that you said in the last segment was a willingness to live in curiosity and not judgment. Which curiosity speaks to me on so many levels. It was the whole reason I got into journalism in the first place. You have to have that curiosity bug and the without judgment, working on it. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate the quote that you've given me today.
But it's such an interesting dynamic because you think about when we judge something, a lot of times it's because we don't understand.
You bet.
Yeah.
Right? And curiosity is the complete opposite of that.
You bet.
Let me get more understanding.
I'll tell you where that came from. I was in 2006. I was downtown with a buddy of mine. We were doing something with business, and we were sitting down at down in the homeless population and sitting on a bench, eating and just chatting. And a guy came up and asked for money, and I looked at him, and this was, I was younger, and I was very, very successful. I was a dropout of high school. I didn't have a father. We grew up, very, very poor. And I said, get a job. And he walked away. And my buddy said, you're a jerk. And I said, why should I give my hard-earned money to somebody who's just walking around begging for it? He said, you don't know his story. I said, yeah, I do. I have the same one. Life's hard. It sucks. You got to put on your boots, tighten them up, and get to work. And that's what he needs to do. And he looked me square across the table in the eye, and he said, I lost respect for you today. A lot. And I didn't think anything of it. We moved on and we parted ways. And I was driving home. It punched me in the gut super hard. And I was really disappointed in myself. And it haunted me the rest of the evening. And so I took this gal that I was working with. And she and I came downtown the next night. And I hunted down a homeless guy and offered to buy him lunch or a dinner. And we went to a Chipotle, strangely enough. And I sat with him for almost an hour and heard his story. And that set me on this path. And so I spent a year interviewing homeless people that turned into average citizens, Starbucks baristas, firefighters, millionaires, jet owners, CEOs. And I asked all of them the same 12 questions. And through that process, I fell in love with homeless people. And today I'm very involved in the homeless community. I walk downtown. I have some of them are my friends, and that we recognize each other. I live down there with them. And it was this idea that I only could have gotten there had I was able to set my judgment aside and be curious about them. Mm-hmm. And so I challenge people all the time. What is the people group you judge? Ooh. And then go spend time with them. And just and go with complete open-hearted curiosity. And you don't have to adopt everything when you're done, but just it's the idea of when there's a car accident on a corner and the police interview all 4 people on the corner. Yep. There's 4 different car accidents that took place because what we saw, heard, what we were in the middle of, and that's all of us, whether it be race relations, whether it be politics, whether it be whatever it may be, all of us have something that we judge, and the thing that I've strived to do since '06 is move on to every single one of my judgments and try and hang out with those people. It's why I ended up sleeving myself in tattoos. Is I never did it because I was afraid of other people's judgment. Okay. But what I've learned is this is a way to help people become more curious. And I think my life's mission now is to teach the concept of living in curiosity and not judgment through the idea of dig into what you're afraid of. If you watch our political system right now, there is little to no curiosity. None. Because and it's all parties. It's going both directions. Yep. And depending on where you live in the country, it's louder in one direction or another. And I really think we have an opportunity to embrace questions. And the more questions you ask, the more information you get, which if you're paying attention and listening should cause more questions. But we're all so fearful in these masks that we wear that we have to show up a certain way and get a certain result. And I really think if we could open our minds and hearts to the curiosity, we could do a lot more things, not just in business, but as a community locally and nationally.
The other thing I love about that is that as you go through that process, you start to find common ground, right? And that's how we relate. And if we are hung up on why we're different, it is very hard for us to ever agree on anything. But if we can boil it down to say, can we agree on this piece? Can we at least get here? We may not get, all 100 here, but can we get to 50%, 60%?
Yep.
Where can we find the common ground and then build off of that we're working in the same direction? And I was having this conversation with one of my team members today about being able to hold each other accountable. And we were talking about how that relationship with some of the people she works with is really great, that she can, she was reflecting on certain things where she can go to them and say, hey, I think we should do it this way. And they don't take it as an attack against them personally. They take it as, oh, yeah, I see. But, because they both have this understanding that we're in service of making sure this event goes great. And then the dynamic with somebody else is, hey, I think we need to do this differently. And it's like a complete attack on that person.
Yep.
And to what you're saying, I think so many of those similarities exist in life when we don't realize what our common ground and what our central bond is that we can at least agree on and then build off from there.
Well, and I think in that, one of the most curious people we should be digging into is ourselves, and it's this idea, and that, it's hard to be curious about yourself because you think you already know everything about yourself. But it's going back to this self-awareness and the commitment to greet each day with out of a grateful heart and a forgiving spirit towards myself first, so that I can go out into the world and successfully see beyond the mask that everyone's wearing and find that curiosity.
So talk a little bit about what has been most impactful in your life in terms of that journey, of your leadership journey, discovering who you are, your self-awareness.
Growing up, I started little businesses when I got my first paper route when I was 11. You had to be 13. I wasn't old enough, so we lied to the paper route and said it was going to be my brother's paper route, and then I actually did all the work, and he stayed in bed, and I had to give him a little bit of the money to use his name, which I thought was a ripoff, but that's what my mom made me do. So he made money to sleep in just because I was using his name. But I fell in love with helping my mom pay bills. I fell in love with business. I was created. My mother, we've had an interesting relationship over the last 40 plus years, but I will tell you, I am who I am today because she needed help and cheered me on as this champion, and she didn't even know she was doing it. But I learned leadership. I learned how to talk to bill collectors at 13 years old. I learned how to negotiate a payment plan at 13 because my mom was, she was overwhelmed. She was a young mom. She had 3 kids. She was working full time. And through that process, I learned a lot about business. But I think through that, I became really aggressive about the winning part. And early in my days, I forgot that people exist. And then over time, into my early 20s, I really understood to find a need and fill it. And that was really my whole, when I was selling real estate, my job was to find a need and fill it. And it didn't mean I was going to make money filling that need. But, whether it be a marriage struggling, whether it be financial chaos for somebody or whatever it was, I just knew that if I could help people achieve what it is they were trying to achieve, that I would be fulfilled in the long run. Truthfully, that's a dangerous path because if you forget to take care of yourself, and there are seasons where I didn't do stuff for myself, I didn't pay attention, and I really missed seasons of my life. Trailora did a lot of that to me. I got so inundated with changing an industry and Trailora, I missed segments of my life that I can't get back. And so being a good leader in business, I think requires more balance than we're teaching the public. I think it requires more commitment to opening the doors to leading other people in different ways and being led by your children, by your friends, by your family. And so I would say that the best of the best leaders are some of the best followers.
Interesting.
Because you can't get people to do what you want them to do if you yourself don't know how to do it. And so leadership isn't about a title. It's not about a rank inside of a company or a paycheck. It's really about turn around behind you and is anyone following? And if they're not, you're probably going the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, it's funny. I was just watching a video, and Colin Powell was talking about the essence of leadership. And one of the things he had said that an advisor had told him is, you're doing a good job when people will follow you out of sheer curiosity. Mm-hmm. Just you've earned their trust, and trust is such a huge thing. And we touched a little bit on the heart leadership, but talk a little bit more about. And I love this because I think you saw some transformation happen at Trailora, and what that did for your culture there.
Yep.
When you started to shift how you led, and did it a little more with your heart.
Yeah, it's a challenge when you're leading a company that's so aggressively messing with the financial structure and really upsetting people. I mean, they were pissed, and that's the only way to put it. Just angry.
Yeah.
Simultaneously having to say, we want to love and serve people well, we want to be kind and compassionate, we want to greet each day with a grateful heart and a forgiving spirit. And the balance of that was exhausting. And I think when we started to get the momentum behind this, we really began to just mute the negative, and that's where we found success. And it was actually again Christopher who brought up that we should let's not go that way. Now it's the double-edged sword of, okay, let's not go that way, but we don't want to give in to the wrong business model either. And so it's just truly a complex thing. And I think this exists all over the place. Is when your yes is yes, it needs to be yes, and when your no is no, it needs to be no. But you have to know that if you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And there's that quote that says, when you get to your grave, you'll never regret the things you did, you'll regret the things you didn't. Mm-hmm. But when you choose to do something, you're choosing not to do something else.
Right.
And and that's it's a complicated thing for a lot of people to put together and understand what the right choice is in the moment. And then we get stuck in this rut that says, I already made the decision, I can't change. I struggled this for quite some time at Trailora. It's like, I have to stay with this. I have to stay with this. But I lost the joy. I lost the vigor. I lost a lot of it. And so your yes needs to be yes. Your no needs to be no. And that's, I think where I've learned most, what Trailora taught me the most is how to be a leader through this commitment of yes being yes and no being no.
Yeah.
And not letting it be gray.
I think, talking about being able to shift, I had, one of my buddies, he said to me, he says, sometimes you make good decisions and sometimes you make your decisions good. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I reflected on that, and I thought about that, and it's like, like for driving people, and I think you could probably relate to this. Sometimes you make a decision and you'll just do whatever you need to do to make sure it's the right one, and it works out. And as leaders, sometimes maybe we need to not beat our head and work so hard just to say that this was the right thing, and to say, okay, maybe it is time to shift course and do something differently. Yeah. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's and to that point, it's as I look at what's next for me, one of the things I have said is I'm going to let the universe open the doors for me, because I've spent my entire life from childhood on kicking doors down and just forcing things to happen successfully. But I honestly think, had I learned earlier to open door software, Trailora would probably be $1 billion company today. I mean, if I look back, if I knew then what I know now, Trailora would be $1 billion company today, no doubt.
I mean, talk a little bit more about what are the things you would have done differently.
When you have an idea inside of an industry that you spent, 15, 17 years in before you start the company, you don't need outside advice on how the industry works. And so I closed the door off to other wisdom, other perspectives, because I was right. And I clung on to things that, you look back now, it's like, good grief. I mean, I hung on to some really stupid crap. The color of a frickin' for sale sign. No teal allowed in the company. I don't want teal anywhere in this. I mean, just really stupid things.
We'll take all your teal.
The venture capital process. I felt so judged in that process, so insecure, so inadequate. Here I am, I'm talking, so many of these venture guys they're geniuses. They have solid backgrounds. You're meeting with 24-year-old kids with Stanford degrees. I quit in the 10th grade, right? I couldn't spell spaghetti and didn't know the difference between the adjective and a noun when I started this. So it's, the intimidation, and I let that fear, my mask, block as a tough guy. And
put up that armor.
I can think of 3 venture capitalists that I messed up, and had they come in 2014 and 15, and had I opened my mind to a different way of thinking, we would have gone further, faster, and there's no doubt we would have crushed it.
Yeah.
And so that's and that's one of the realities that I have to live with. But it's and that's where we're not perfect now. As I go forward, am I going to learn from that, or am I going to be an idiot and repeat the mistakes I've made?
Yeah.
I'm gonna learn from it. Yeah, just want to make sure I get that out. I've learned.
It was you knew the answer to that question.
I hope.
So let's talk about this, because I know that this was a very difficult thing for you to do, to step down from your baby. This is what you founded and worked so hard for, to take that, have that realization, number one, that this was best for you and for the company. But then the aftermath of that, what was that process like?
Catastrophic. Yeah, I really thought it was going to be good. I left, and I think it was a shift for everyone involved. The executive team left behind, the board, me. It was hard. It was very, very hard. And I tell you, and I don't know if I'm proud of this, and I know I'm not proud of it, but I said for years I have 6 kids in Trailora, and I love all 7 equally. And there were many seasons where that was absolutely true, and probably seasons where I loved Trailora more, just based on the way I showed my actions.
Yeah.
There was an 18-month period where I didn't take a day off, and I was working, 14-hour days, 12-hour days, just nonstop, go, 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 go. And that doesn't, you can tell your kids you love them.
Actions speak louder than words.
But that to them, they're like, yeah, whatever. And I'm so blessed. My kids they were all in on Trailora. The kids' mom was in on Trailora. Like we were in.
That's cool. That you had their support.
Yeah.
But here I am looking back. Never ever again will I do that to myself. Never. Mm-hmm. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't nothing. And I sacrificed everything because I just knew that I knew. And the story I told myself was, when this goes big, I'm going to go back and make up for all of it. Well, you can't go backwards and make up for stuff. Sure, you can do fun stuff forward,
but we think we can.
Yeah, and so this is again the mask, right? And I have extraordinary kids. I have an extraordinary ex-wife, and we're all very close. But our commitment to the success of the business, or their willingness to let me be. The only way to put it is obsessive compulsive. I mean, I was head over heels in love with this company, and I don't want to go back and change it. I'll just never do it again. Uh-huh. And so wherever I go next, it's going to be very, very different.
And what have you gone through to figure that out? I mean, that's I don't know a little bit of it, so you don't have to go into all of it.
Let me say this. I don't know if maybe I'm not supposed to go this way, but it was dark. Yeah. When I came out of the closet. I stood on the back of a cruise ship and almost committed suicide because I was so afraid. And I was saved that night by a woman who came up to me, who didn't know me. We were just taking off. It's the first day of the cruise, and she came up. And we chatted a bit. I have no clue what we said. But she walked away, and a couple minutes later, I hear her footsteps come back, and she simply placed her hand on my shoulder, and she said, "Tonight, I feel like you need to know you matter." And she saved me. And I said to myself, I will never get that dark again. But I did. Because what I realized is Trailora in February, March, just this past, few months ago, I realized I started Trailora right after coming out of the closet. And I started Trailora with a vengeance because I parted ways with my partnerships because I came out of the closet. Mm-hmm. And so I don't need to badmouth anybody, but it just wasn't a respectful, kind way to part with somebody who was in a dark day. And what I realized really in January, February, March, I never finished coming out of the closet. I never truly stopped to accept Joshua Hunt for a good person, that he matters, that he's good, that he's kind, that he's gracious, and he's human, and he makes mistakes, and he can't be perfect for everyone all the time. Mm-hmm. When I was in the church as a kid, I had the prayer of Paul. I wanted to be all things to all people. That is a catastrophically, miserably, horrible, stupid prayer.
Hard.
That is dumb. But I spent, and there were many seasons in Trailora, I was trying to do it. And so really just letting go of all of it. and accept and forgiving, greeting each day with a grateful heart and a forgiving spirit. It starts with me, right? And I'm very fortunate. I have 3 or 4 people in my life who have tolerated my chaos for the last, in the first, 4 or 5 months of the year. But it's this idea that I can't help others if I haven't helped myself truly. To put your air mask on before you help anyone else.
Yep.
Yes.
And you could not have convinced me in January that I would have been so devastated. I mean, gasping for air, just mourning.
Yeah.
And I think I'd go a week where I'd be like, whew, got through that one, and then the next week he'd come and punch me harder. And I made some I wasted 4 or 5 months just mourning, but I think I had to get through the internal dialogue in my head. I'd love to tell you I'm all done and I'm ready to go. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's not wasted time.
It's not. It is not
Yes.
wasted time. It's. I would have preferred to have read about it, or like watched a video, but apparently that's. And you know what? I have read about it, and I have watched video, and I didn't learn. So, but it's interesting because, what's next for me? And I think about this. I'm a dropout with 23 years in real estate. I am terrified about what I'm going to do next because I had this. Like today, I could go back and sell traditional real estate. I could go to commercial. I know the industry 3 different ways, backwards, forwards, and upside down. But I'm done, and I'm ready to do something where I contribute to community and companies and whatever, and people, this idea that you matter. God, you so deeply matter beyond your wildest dreams. And the mask you wear, it's lovely, and it looks great, but I want you to love both sides of the mask, and I want you to be curious about yourself, and I want you to stand in grace and kindness and forgiveness and compassionate and gratitude for yourself. And so that's really the work I'm head down working hard on myself now is, can I look in the mirror and forgive myself of the seasons that I regret? And I'm getting closer, but there's definitely, and I think it's a lifelong journey. You talk to people in their 70s and 80s, and they talk about it. And I always ask myself, I just said a little bit ago, if I knew then what I know now, boy, would it be different.
Yeah.
So now, what am I going to say when I'm 55, 65, if I knew then what I know now? So how do I embrace knowing what I need to know now and slowing down a little bit and opening my mind and heart to what other people could help me succeed with?
This is phenomenal, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your willingness to share your story. I think we need more of this in business, and that's at the essence of kind of what we're talking about. That we don't have to just put on this show of it's all great and let me show you all the great things I'm doing on social media and how happy I am and how here's the best picture that's been modified and we're just showered with these positive best and it's not the truth of what somebody's really going through. So for you to open up and be honest about that, my hope is, with you and with, what we do in our company, that gives people the okay and the freedom for them to then lean in and talk about, here's what's going on in my life. And you're right, there's a time and a place for everything. But when we start to see people as people and we talk about valuing people for more than the job they do. I don't look at, oh, you bake and you sell and you do, no, you're this person and you are part of this family and I want to know what's important to you. And that's going to help me be a better manager for you and create a better space for you to be here, for you to have a home here and for you to get fulfillment out of what you're doing. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing your story and being vulnerable with us.
And this is fun. Thank you.
Yes, this has been phenomenal. It's one of the best conversations we've had. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here, Joshua.
Happy to do it. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Can't wait to follow your journey and see.
Here we go.
See what you do next.
Terrified, but I'm going.
It's the best way to go.
I'm going to follow you out of curiosity.
That's good.
I love hearing that. Yes, thank you so much, Joshua. I appreciate your time and your story today. I also am looking forward to more from you. Anthony, I always get to see you once a month at least, and so I'm looking forward to next month's show as well.
We'll see you then.
Yes, absolutely. One more time, be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. You can find this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Type in Anthony Lambatos, type in Footers Catering. You can find all of our past shows that we've had. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.